Hello, I am Lauren Ohayon from Restore Your Core. In this video, I want to teach you about your core. I want you to do some assessments to determine what is going on in your core. And before we get started with those assessments, just a little bit of a story and then some background information about your core. I never just layer on assessments without giving educational content as well. So I recently had a fitfluencer, I just learned that word, come to see me because they are somebody who does a lot of fitness. She does a lot of fitness. She then got pregnant, had a baby, and ended up with a diastasis recti separation that didn't close. So 6 months postpartum, she still had this diastasis recti. She had lost all of the pregnancy weight. She was back to doing her fitness, and she came to me incredibly confused, upset, shocked, feeling let down by her body because this is somebody who eats, sleeps, and drinks fitness, no body fat, which I'm not saying that because I believe people should have no body fat, but because this is what our culture has trained us to believe, is that how you look. So she looked fantastic according to cultural standards. She met the standards, and yet she had this core injury, this separation, which was incredibly, again, disheartening to her. I have taken care of myself. Why is this happening to me? And so we ran through a lot of the same assessments I'm going to give you today. And then it became very apparent to her how she looks on the outside, her ability to lift, run, reach, and throw doesn't necessarily correlate with having a core that is functional and integrated as part of the system. So where is your core? Your core, many people think of our core as the belly, and that is what we are offered in terms of self-assessment. If your belly looks flat, tight, and toned, you are perceived to be then strong and superior in the core area. But the belly and how it looks on the outside is not your core. So let's redefine the core for a moment. We're going to define the core as being the area of the abdominals, the area of the pelvic floor, the area of the pelvis, the area of the rib cage. So we've got a top, a bottom, a front, and then the area of the spine. And those are the areas that we're going to assess today to see how your core is working. So now you know where is the core. What does your core do? Your core receives movement information and is designed to react a specific way according to that. When you eat food, your mouth receives information and is designed to react. It's designed to chew, to swallow, to secrete hormones, to get things moving as far as metabolism, and blood sugar is affected, digestion kicks in. All of these systems, when you put food in your mouth, your core is no different. It is an automatic system that is designed to respond to any sort of movement. So some movement needs a lot of response and stiffening and engaging, and other movements need much, much less. Your core is this area that receives the input from the upper body, the lower body. And again, it is like a conduit. It kind of transmits that force in through the body to help support your body through that movement. When you don't have good core responsiveness, you are potentially robbing Peter to pay Paul with a lot of your movements. For example, if I go to pick up that stretchy thing on the floor, and I go to pick it up and I lack a core support. So instead of maybe going down with support through my trunk, which might look like this, where my spine stays mostly long, where I'm hinging at my hips, where my knees are bending, it might look like just kind of like this collapse through the body. So my body takes this path of least resistance to get the activity done. And that path of least resistance might be like just the way you're used to doing things, but it might have a It might mean that you are utilizing your core less functionally again and again and again, overworking, like we said before, kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul, borrowing movement to make the movement easier on your body, but yet not loading your core enough for the movement. So it might look like, again, this kind of like collapsing through the system. And if I'm doing that again and again all day long, and I'm not tasking my core to respond effectively, then I, again, can be accruing certain compensation patterns in through the core. So where is the core? We discussed that. What is the core? You now know that your core is a system designed to handle the chores of life. And let's talk about this idea again quickly before we get into the assessments of fit versus functional. How something looks on the outside is not indicative of how something will be working. Now, I don't care if you want to go off and work on having six-pack abs and a flat belly and, all of that stuff. That's your personal choice, and I support you. But I just want to explain that is just how it looks on the outside. That is not indicative of how functional something is, how well your body is handling load and movement. So just keep those things in mind. What we are going to do, since we defined the core as being the pelvis, the ribs, the spine, the breath, and the core, we are going to test those areas and just give a little bit of context to each area. Because if you are spot treating your core, let's say you have a core injury, let's say you have no core injury, you just maintenance and sustenance, right? Like just maintenance and making sure your core is in good form, then you want to know this information, because what we are trained to do is spot treat, do your crunches, all of that stuff, which again, I'm not against crunches, they're just a movement. But because your core is more than just this set of muscles and it's the whole region, your core is only as functional as the rest of the region is mobile, adaptable, strong, and available. So if you have really tight upper body, for example, and your ribs don't move and your spine doesn't move and you're more hunched over, or you're in this pattern, this really big extensor pattern, your core will be affected because this is the top of the core system. And it is a requirement to be able to have adequate mobility, strength, availability, and motion, so that as we move and we do those activities, our body is able to access the entire core system as we do our movements. If we are not able to access our entire core system, again, we are borrowing movement and we are creating restrictions, constrictions, and possible points of injury as a result of lacking really essential movement and mobility. So we're going to test all of that right now. We're going to start with addressing the pelvis. Does your pelvis move? Where is it lacking? None of this is designed to be a point of judgment. Like, you're not meant to, I don't want you doing these assessments and being like, oh my gosh, I suck. I don't have pelvic mobility. No, your body is so adaptable. It can change with just really small, regular doses of movement. So for these assessments, you will need some sort of a belt. So it can be a belt, a resistance band, a yoga strap, anything long fabric, a sweatshirt, not a t-shirt, something a bit longer, like with sleeves. We won't use it yet. Come to lie on your back. The first thing we want to see is, does your pelvis move forward and backward, right? So what we see a lot in our world is that people are stuck in this posterior tilted position or in this big anterior tilted position. Both of those affect the ability for the core wall to work in an integrated, functional way with the rest of the body. So let's check in to see what's happening in your pelvis. Lie on your back. Place your feet on the floor. And all I want you to do is imagine you have a marble, like the toy, the marble, and it's right in the center of your so kind of split the distance in half between your belly button and your pubic bone. That's where your pubic hair is, that bony area right in the center of your pelvis. And you've got your belly button, and split the distance between the two of them and put a marble there, a pretend marble. And I want you to start to move your pelvis forward and backwards so that marble can roll backwards and forwards. So if I want the marble to fall between my feet, I am doing what's called untucking my pelvis so that the marble can move towards between my knees. If I want the marble to move towards my ribs and my chin, I'm tucking my pelvis under me. Now, I want you to check in with, when you do that, do your ribs want to arch and pull off the floor? Do your feet want to grip and push and pull your pelvis? Can you stop doing either one of those things and try to mobilize your pelvis just from the pelvis? Now, if you find referred movement through the ribs and the feet, that's normal, but see if it's your pelvis that can guide this movement. Now, I'm expecting that you can push pause on the video as needed. So I'm going to go through these quickly, and I want you to pause and kind of just take stock of what you find. The next exercise for your pelvic mobility assessment is on your hands and knees, and we are doing the same thing. We are thinking about the marble being right above our butt crack. And if the marble is right above your butt crack and you want to move that marble around, can you move your pelvis up and down without collapsing your ribs like this, without using your hands? It's not a cat and cow. I am isolating just my glutes and my lumbar spine. And I'm seeing if I can just create movement there. Now, there might be movement through the rest of my spine, of course, but I'm not using that to get my pelvis to move. We take it one step further up to standing, because now when we're standing, we can also assess and address how much our hamstrings might be affecting our pelvic mobility, and we split our legs in a distance. It doesn't matter which leg is forward and which leg is back, just split them on two different train tracks, a little bit of a distance. It's not a big lunge. And then think about your marble, keep your spine totally straight and try to roll your marble. So if your marble, you just moving your pelvis up and down, and notice if you can keep your spine long. Look at my body. Now I'm bending through my spine to get forward. This is where using a mirror will be very valuable for you. Can you spread your pelvis, spread your sitting bones, and then bring them under you? And just noticing where maybe you stop here, maybe you get further down, but seeing again if your pelvis is able to mobilize, and just being very honest in your assessment. So that is the pelvis motion just in this plane. Our pelvis can move in different planes, but for this assessment today, we're just looking at that. When the pelvis is stuck in one direction, forward or backward, it becomes really hard to access the deep core and to have that functional core that acts as a conduit and that acts as support for movement. So the next thing we want to look at is breath, so we're jumping up to the breathing. How we breathe really impacts core integrity. I want you to sit down. You can sit on a chair, on a yoga block, on your feet, on your butt. Doesn't really matter to me. I want you to be comfortable. So if you sit in a cross-legged position, I don't want you hunched over. And your knees up here, tension. I want your spine to be able to be long wherever you sit. And I want you to place one hand on your belly and one hand on your ribs, and you're going to try this exercise. One breath is going to be a big belly breath. Really just breathe, push out into your belly, and then stop that. And the next breath is going to be, can you get your ribs to expand big? No movement in your belly. Just big rib movement. Exhale. Inhale just into your belly. Release. Inhale just into your ribs. No belly movement. No belly movement. You see, I'm not pushing my belly out at all. Exhale. Go back and forth. And then, so again, pause the video, go back and forth. And then I want you to close your eyes, one hand on your ribs, one hand on your belly, and see what moves more as you breathe quietly. Now, in my line of business, the majority of people will say that their belly hand is moving more, and it looks like this. So they suddenly discover that as they breathe, belly, belly, belly moves, they get very little rib movement. And when I mean rib movement, I mean expansion, ribs expanding and opening. I don't mean just kind of like maybe a little bit of movement here, okay? So rib movement or belly movement. If you are only doing belly breathing all the time, you are probably not utilizing your core pelvic floor and breathing unit efficiently. So noticing that is really important. The next thing, so this video is a lot of education and assessment. Once you figure out kind of where your blind spots are, you can start to resolve that. So with breathing, we are really looking for a 3-dimensional rib breath. From there, we go into assessing how your core actually engages when it engages, right? So what I want you to do is to actually stay sitting, please. I'm sorry, stay sitting. Place your hand on your belly again. I'm gonna face this way. And take an in-breath. Try to breathe more into your rib cage. And as you exhale, imagine you have 300 birthday candles in front of you and blow them out really slowly. And as you do so, notice how your belly starts to tighten in. Do that a few times. Pause the video, do it a few times. Every time you exhale, notice your abdominals corseting inward. Now I want you to take yourself to your elbows and butt, excuse me. And I want you to, don't sag down into your shoulder, please. Stay lifted out of your shoulders and look at your abdominals. Yeah, look at your belly. And I want you to lift one leg up and the other leg up. And notice if your belly stays pulled in or pushes outward. Let's do it on breath. Inhale. Exhale, blow those candles. Feel your belly corseting. Can you keep that corset? Can you keep your belly pulled in tight like that as your leg comes up? Or you exhale, you corset. Your belly is in, it's in, and the second this leg comes up, it's out, like that. Now I just pushed my belly out, right? We do not want that. We do not want the abdominals pushing outward, especially for a pretty low load move like this. So you are just noticing what your tendency is, because I can almost guarantee you as you're moving around, you know, picking up things, picking up kids, strollers, or no kids, no strollers, groceries, items, you start to feel what it's like to push your belly out. I can almost guarantee you, only because I've worked with thousands and thousands of people over the last 24 years, so I know what people do, that your abdominals are trained to push outward. And that is putting a lot of strain and pressure. And this fitfluencer that I had worked with, who had a pregnancy and a baby and a diastasis recti, was a champion pusher outer and was shocked when she found that out. Shocked. She was also stuck in a pelvis that wasn't very mobile. And then this pushing out in her core, and suddenly she was like, oh, it kind of makes sense why I was not loading my core appropriately, the combination of these patterns. The next thing I want you to assess in this is going to be how well, so this is core, this is kind of a combination of a few of those, but this is where you pick up your band. Now, if you're using a stretchy band like I am, I don't want the band to be put on a stretch, just make sure it doesn't do that. So you're just holding the band in your arms and you're looking in the mirror and you're testing to see, I have a mirror right there too, and you're testing to see how high you can raise your arms up before your ribs arch like this. So before we begin that, I want you to put your ribs in a relaxed down position. So go ahead and push your ribs forward a little bit, arch up like a gymnast back bendy thing, and then relax that down. So don't necessarily pull your ribs down, just keep them relaxed down. Keeping them relaxed down, go ahead, reach your arms up. And how much can you lift your arms up before your ribs go for the ride? That is very indicative. Again, think about how much you do with your arms overhead. And if every time you reach your arms overhead, which could be this amazing core moment, you take your core out of it by robbing Peter to pay Paul, by overarching in your ribs. So doing that assessment should give you a great idea of that. How much reach do you get before you default into taking it out of the core, like removing the core from the equation and utilizing your spine instead. Same thing here. Hug your knee into your chest. I don't care which knee. Now do it again. Look at me. Notice that my spine doesn't change position. So look at what I didn't do. I didn't do this. I didn't bend my left knee. I didn't hunch. This is my left knee. This is my standing knee. I didn't hunch my spine. None of that. I'm going to keep my left knee totally straight, and I'm going to keep my spine as it is. I'm not going to arch it or round it, and I'm going to lift my knee and hug it in. From here, so that's the first assessment. Can you do that? And then can you hold your knee in place without that changing? Again, super important. Think about how often we move. Obviously, you're not swinging your leg this much, but walking through life requires us to be able to swing our leg while maintaining integrity through the trunk, stabilization of the trunk as the leg moves. If that's challenging for you, if lifting your leg up causes pelvic response to tuck or your body to arch, then that is something you want to know about your movement pattern, because it's not just showing up in this assessment. It's a restriction. And finally, I want to have you assess your spine and how much spinal motion you get on again, we're doing forward and backward. This is called the sagittal plane today. We're not going to be, we'll assess rotation in a second. So in the forward backward place, I want you to put the marble on your back between your shoulder blades. And I want you to start to move your spine. Remember how we moved the pelvis before? This time, we're not going to be moving the pelvis. We're going to be moving the spine. Now, I know you can take your spine and round it like this. But can you take your spine and arch it the other way? So watch me arch my spine the other way. But what I didn't do is drop my body down. So watch. I did not collapse my ribs to the floor. In fact, to get my ribs to arch, to get my spine to arch, I'm as if letting my collarbones, which are here, look forward. So I'm looking my collarbone forward, staying lifted on my arms and not collapsed down. So I'm rounding my back like a cat. And then I'm thinking about cow, but I'm thinking about cowing without falling through my spine at all. And I'm not doing this in my neck. It's not about my neck. Now that is a motion that many people struggle to get into. They think they're doing it because they're collapsing through their shoulders or they're dropping their ribs to the floor. But if you don't let your ribs drop down or your shoulders, can you generate arch? Like think about your lower back arching. You can feel that. Can you arch your upper back, or does it feel like one big thick brick that has no movement? That's okay. That can change. You just want to know that about your spine. And our final assessment with the spine and with this whole fun that we're playing together is to place your hands around your ribs, hands, fingertips. And I want you to think about shifting your ribs off to the right. This is my right. I don't mirror image when I teach. So I'm going to shift my ribs to my right. Then I'm going to side bend on my left, but just really through my ribs. Then I'm going to think about twisting my ribs open to the right. Then I'm going to think about moving into a back bend, to go to the other side, twisted open. Then I'm going to think about the side bend on the other side. I'm side bending my right side now, and I'm coming back up. Let's do it the other way. I'm going to shift my ribs off to the left first. So the first question is like, do your ribs even shift? Or are you trying to do it in your waist or your hips? Can you keep all of this quiet, this area quiet, as you just shift your ribs to your left. Take your ribs off to your left. Then you're going to side bend more on the right side. Now you're going to twist your ribs open to your left. Let your chest look open to the sky on the left. Hello to the sky. Now you want to back bend to get to the other side. So you're going to take your back into a back bend. But notice that I'm not moving my pelvis at all. So I'm not here, right, at all. My pelvis is still. As I back bend, shift my ribs the other way, side bend the other way, and come out of it. So we're making a circle. So it's a shift to the right. It's a side bend. It's a look up and open. I take that back. It was a shift. That was a shift to the left. Excuse me. My ribs shift to the left. It's a side bend on the right, but I'm not using my hips. I'm using my ribs. It's a twist open to the left. Reach the ribs. Notice my pelvis is really quiet as I go into extension of my upper spine. And back into the side bend on the left, and I come back up and I start going by shifting to the left. Okay, so, that movement can be complicated, especially because I don't mirror image, but you're basically questioning, like, can you rotate your spine around and around and around and around? What we didn't do was we didn't complete the circle by going forward. So you want to add that in. Once you get the kind of circular motion, which confuses people a lot, then you start just doing circles where can you, again, push your spine backwards here into, it's like doing cat from cat and cow. Most people can do that, so I'm not as curious about that in my assessments of people, because most people have no problem rounding their spine that way, taking it into flexion. Okay, so those were your assessments. What did we assess? We assessed how well your pelvis moves. We assessed how does your core bulge. We assessed, are you a belly breather, or do you default more into a three-dimensional rib expansion? We assessed how well can you move your arms and legs without your spine, core, and trunk needing to do something to get that movement. And then we assessed your spine. How well can you extend and flex your spine? And then taking your spine more on a circle, how much movement do you have there? These components are very important. Before you start thinking about, again, is my core strong? Like, it doesn't really matter if you can do a full sit-up if you actually can't access the other ranges. You're just spot treating, but you're not actually getting into the entire system. So if you are working with a back injury, a diastasis recti, pelvic floor dysfunction, any of those elements, you really, even prolapse leaking, urine leaking, any of those elements, you really want to make sure that the whole system, as I said before, is available, is reflexive, is responsive, and is working as an entire integrated unit. I hope that these assessments have been helpful for you, and thank you for joining today.